Hello, everyone, and welcome to Community Conversations. It's my great pleasure today to have with us Rachel Moore, the CEO of the Music Center of Los Angeles, a dear friend and one of the true great arts civic leaders in our town and our country. And so it's really a pleasure, Rachel, to have you with us here today. Welcome to Community Conversations.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm delighted to be able to join.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. You know, it has been such a crazy time in our world in the last year. With COVID, with the shutdown, and of course your organization and so many that you are involved with have really been under quite a bit of strain and pressure over the last year, would you say?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Well, I'm glad that things are opening up again, and that you know, we're gonna be at the Hollywood Bowl next week. We've gone to a few concerts so far, and things are slowly opening up again, but it's certainly been a crazy time, challenging time.
Yes, absolutely.
But you know, I want to thank you again for being on the show, as I call it, because you have such an interesting background and such an interesting experience, and I think our listeners will find it illuminating and helpful and interesting. You grew up in Davis, California, and I will hold off on the veterinarian jokes because everyone thinks immediately of veterinarians. I do, Davis. So you grew up in Davis, California. And what was that like? And then you said that you'd also lived in India and you speak Punjabi.
Oh, well, I don't anymore, but yes, it was my first language. And then we moved to Saudi Arabia for a while.
Wow.
And we came back to Davis. My dad was a professor at UC Davis.
Wow.
And, you know, back then schools had a lot of arts in them. And we went to San Francisco to see theater, opera, symphonies, ballet. So, you know, I grew up with a lot of the arts. And, you know, I went to public school, and when I was about 11, I started taking ballet class and became enamored with ballet. And when I was 13, Mr. Joffrey and the Joffrey Ballet came to UC Davis to perform. They did a master class.
Wow.
And Mr. Joffrey asked me to come to New York to study.
Wow.
And my parents were like, not a chance in hell are you going to New York at the age of 13. But I think that it set the stage for my parents that I was had some talent and I was very serious. And so I trained very extensively going to New York in the summers. And when I was 18, I moved to New York to join American Ballet Theater. So
my gosh, that's extraordinary. I can remember seeing the ABT when I was a kid, and I think my first ballet that I saw was with Maya Plisetskaya and Alexander Godunov at the Shrine Auditorium.
Gosh.
I was, I think, 16 years old. It was just awesome.
Yeah.
So you have a background in art. You're an artist. You're a dancer. Do you still dance? Do you still take class?
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
No, I left dancing because I seriously injured my foot, and so I do other things. I'm a big Soul Cycle nut,
Awesome.
but not dancing. And you know, the thing is, when I occasionally will take a class, it's just so pathetic.
Well, it is a rigorous profession, and you know, Raimundo studied ballet for a number of years, and he'll still go to class and don't get between him and the front door when he's on his way, because he just loves it. He goes over to Colburn and studies. But that's wonderful. I mean, and then you moved to New York to dance, and then you ended up running the American Ballet Theater. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, it was after I finished dancing with ABT, I went to college, Brown, and then went to graduate school and worked at a number of arts organizations from Washington and Boston. And I was running the school at Boston Ballet, which is the largest school in North America. And ABT had gone through a series of rough patches and gone through a number of executive directors, like about 6 of them in a short period of time. And somebody said to me, why don't you throw your hat in the ring? And I was like, oh, they'll never look at me. And so I did it because I thought it was good experience. You know, I went in with absolutely no sense that I would possibly be hired. And what I learned there was 18 people in the search committee. is that I knew more about ballet and ABT than anybody else in that room. And so I was really comfortable and confident. And so, you know, because once again, I thought that I would never get the job. I wasn't nervous. And they asked me to come back a second time. I was like, oh, okay. And during the middle of the interview, the chair of the search committee said, oh, you're doing really well. And I was very proud of myself. And I remember walking out and walking up the street, and they gave me a call and they said, can you meet the chairman of the board at 5 o'clock? And that's when it dawned on me that I might actually get the job
that same day.
And I freaked out.
Wow. Wow.
So I went back to the hotel and I called my husband. And because this was, you know, ABT is such a big name, and I was really worried. And he said, it's okay to say no if you really don't think you can do the job. It's not okay to say no if you're simply scared. And so I ended up back at ABT, and I was there because, boy, over 11 years running ABT before I came here.
Wow. Well, I remember, of course, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I realized the first time that I went to the music center as a kid, the building was only about 8 years old, now that I think back on it. And of course, it's now over 50 years old. And I actually have something for you later on that I'll give you. But my grandmother and grandfather are very dear friends with Dorothy Chandler and her husband. And I have quite a bit of correspondence. So I have a fun little thing for you. But when the music center was built, it was a huge deal. It was the first time that Los Angeles had really come of age. You know, they'd had concerts at the old Philharmonic Hall downtown. It was followed, of course, after the music center was built, it was followed by the Los Angeles County Art Museum. And you just saw this explosion take place. And it was a very special place. And, you know, led by the legendary civic leaders and arts leaders of Los Angeles, you know, these storied names. And of course, I knew 3 of your predecessors personally, and still do. But what a world for you to walk into from New York. What was that like?
As much as I love ballet, I was interested in a broader sense of what the arts can do and that civic identity. And coming to the music center, I would still get to be involved with dance because we have Gloria Kaufman Presents Dance and all that. But I could really think about how the arts are part of a cultural fabric of a community in a much broader sense than when you're in a discipline-specific organization. And so, you know, being able to stand on the shoulders of Dorothy Buffum Chandler, you know, she was a great civic leader. And I think that the Music Center has both an artistic identity and a civic identity. And it's been really fun for me to be able to grow in that way as a professional and to really talk about how the arts change lives and transform communities and, you know, build on all of that. So it was very exciting to come. When I was running ABT, we used to tour here regularly. So I sort of knew the city, but I really didn't know the city.
Yeah.
And it was such a joy because it's not a city, it's a multiplicity of communities. And, you know, Pasadena is very different from Malibu, which is very different from Culver City. And everybody, you know, each one has their unique and fantastic identity. And so you get to visit these other little worlds when you go into different communities. And that has been tremendous fun to explore and to learn. And each community is actually pretty small. You know, people really know each other. It's great. And the arts community in Los Angeles is also, you know, people know each other and are completely passionate about the arts. It's really been such a pleasure to be here. I can't tell you.
Well, I remember when it was announced that you had gotten the position, and I was thrilled because for a number of reasons. But most of all, you would bring a fresh perspective. You know, I had a boss years ago who gave me the best advice ever. She said, Jonathan, if it ain't broke, break it. And I've always lived by that. And you brought a fresh perspective and new ideas. And in no way to disparage the past, but it was time. It was time for that. And I remember the first time we had lunch at OTM, just down the street from the DCP. And it was such a perfect LA moment because standing behind us was our former mayor, James Hahn. And I got to grab him and say, I'd like to introduce you to the new CEO of the Music Center. I thought that was one of those great LA moments. Who he's now a Superior Court judge. But you have done things with the Music Center in terms of its artistic content and its community outreach that are brand new, that had never been done before. I can remember when the Music Center had a competent, good outreach program for schools, and that was about it. The issue of diversity, the issue of really throwing the net out, really, really evolved under your leadership. It has continued to. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I really have to give credit to the board, because when they were hiring my position, they really wanted somebody to come in and talk about how the Music Center could be relevant in the 21st century. How the world has changed, how Los Angeles has changed, and they wanted to lean into the artistic side as well. And so they were absolutely gung-ho to go on this journey. And we talk a lot about, when I first came, the board was about 6% of color. We're now about 40% of color.
Awesome.
We've, transformed the face of the board, because the Music Center's building and land are owned by the county. We have a moral obligation to serve everyone in the county. And part of that is having a board that looks like the county. And so we worked hard on that. And we really, when we redid our strategic plan, we changed our vision to deepening the cultural life of every resident of LA County, so that we're not assuming that we own culture and that we confer it onto others, but rather culture is all around us, and we have so much to learn, and we strive to deepen people's relationships with it. And regardless of whether you're in San Pedro or Antelope Valley or wherever, we have that obligation. And so we broadened our programmatic offerings and have been really blessed to have some incredible philanthropists to help us fund free and low cost programming for the people of LA County. So that's been really great. And I've hired, I restructured the organization, hired some terrific people, just wonderful team members who have helped as we've sort of changed our identity and expanded our offerings. And I will say, with Grand Park and with the newly renovated Jerry Moss Plaza, we have these opportunities to serve people in lots of different ways, which has been super exciting.
It makes me so happy to hear you say that, Rachel, because it's so important. The arts has for decades been the private playground of candidly wealthy, affluent, and almost entirely white people. Yeah. The survey in the Los Angeles Times 2 or 3 weeks ago was troubling. 500 plus arts organizations, museums and arts organizations in town. 500 board seats, and I think 15 or 18 were held by African Americans, and that needs to change. And you're leading the charge on that. I wanted to be a concert pianist. I studied very seriously as a young man. I did play the first movement of the Grieg A minor at my high school graduation. And I still play a little bit, but I was lucky that I discovered it as a young boy and fell in love with music and dance and theater. And I think what you're doing is so important to create those opportunities, because I think arts is the reason for living. It is one of the things that just nourishes your soul and your spirit like nothing else. I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely. I think it fosters humanity. It allows us to see the world in new and different ways. And it brings joy. And there isn't enough joy in this world.
No, there sure isn't. My gosh. Well, I guess up to this point, I would love to ask you, what are you most proud of at this point? And wave the magic wand. What can we expect in the future? What are you working on? What are you excited about? What can we anticipate in the coming years?
I am super proud of how we've transformed the board and the team that we've built. I'm also incredibly proud that we built the Plaza, because that had been on the docket for many, many years. I'm proud that we have navigated through COVID with our values intact and still creating. And I think that we will emerge a stronger institution on lots of different levels. So I'm very proud around that. As I look forward, it's really going to be about greatly expanding our ability to bring free and low cost programming to people, and to really have the programming resonate with all sorts of different communities. And there's a wonderful writer by the name of Chimamanda Adichie, and she says the danger of the single story is not that it is untrue, but that it is incomplete. And I think that the traditional arts have been telling wonderful stories, but the stories are incomplete. And I'm very excited about being part of telling new stories, stories that resonate in the hearts of independent women, people of color, from all sorts of different communities, sexual orientation, what have you. I love ballet. It's the canon is very narrow, and I think we have opportunities there. But also, I think that the arts, and certainly the Music Center, has focused on art for people, and we're building on creating people create art themselves. So I think that those other modes of interacting with art are huge opportunities to explore, and I'm excited about doing some of that as we move forward and really activating the Plaza. And we opened the Plaza on Labor Day 2 years ago, and then we never got to have a real summer. So I think there's going to be huge opportunities to do lots of fun stuff. And we built a stage on the Plaza this summer. We're doing dance performances outside, which is just a taste of, I think, what we can do in the future.
I love all of this. And what you're doing in Grand Park is awesome. Gloria Molina invited me to be the founding chair of the Grand Park Foundation. And at the time, the county and still was contracted with the Music Center. And I just said quietly, I said, why don't we just have the Music Center have eminent domain over Grand Park and make it all one big campus? I would love to see that happen, quite frankly.
Well, it has.
It has now. Good.
We have just signed a 30-year contract with the county.
Congratulations. That is awesome. That is just awesome.
So it's we're trying to figure it all out.
Well, yeah, I always thought of Grand Park, and for those who are listening and don't know what Grand Park is, it's this spectacular, huge public space just east of the Music Center Plaza. It's sort of like a big giant waterfall that just goes right down to City Hall. And it's such a wonderful palette for so many things that you can do for the community. I do worry about one thing, Rachel. We go to the concert, we go to the opera, and it's so damn expensive. I look at these tickets, I look at the expense of operating these venues, and I worry with all the things that are available to entertain you in the world. Who's going to buy those tickets in 10, 20 years? Who's going to write those big checks to really underwrite and support these things? And I know that that's part of your role as well as fundraising and, navigating all these personalities and these competing interests and dynamics. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about fundraising, because I know that we have fundraisers and development professionals who are listening in. And you're running one of the biggest shops in town. I always say the music center is the department store on the mall. It's an important institution. So could you talk a little bit about fundraising and how that works?
Well, I think that in the arts, fundraising has become increasingly reliant on major donors or individual donors. As you know well, corporations have moved away from funding the arts. Foundations are not necessarily, it's not, there's any number of foundations who no longer support the arts. They're more interested in focusing on social matters. So it's going to be the individual donor that is going to be the lifeblood of the arts. And through COVID, we spent a lot of time making sure that our current relationships, building them, keeping them strong, to help us get through this moment. But it's definitely about the individual. And for an individual donor, people want to make meaningful change in their lives. And so identifying for others, not just themselves, but how can you develop giving that is meaningful to the donor as well as the institution? Because it's really a win-win that way. And when people give a gift and know that they're transforming others' lives, it's really remarkable and beautiful. And so it's about having a compelling story to tell about how their gift is going to make a difference in the world. And because I think the arts make the world a better place, it's not hard for me to sell.
You got a great product. So another question I must ask you about is, I'll bet you're a great boss. I ought to send you my resume. Leadership is an art. I've had the greatest bosses, greatest leaders in the world, and I've had some who should be in jail. Actually, some may be in jail. I'm not sure. Tell me a little bit about your leadership style. What makes a great leader? What's it like, getting up every day and being at the helm of this organization, a complex institution with hundreds of employees, and such expectation?
Yeah, so we have about 1,400 employees. So yes, we're pretty big. So I think it starts with, and this is my philosophy around leadership, it's not about me, it's about the vision. And everything we need to do needs to feed the vision. And so you hire a team to help you execute the vision. And especially a place like the Music Center, we're stewards of an extraordinary institution. And so I've built a team that has the same sort of commitment to that value, that the arts are important and that we really believe in this vision of deepening the cultural life of Angelenos. And, I'm not a micromanager. That's not how I run things. If sort of my view is, if I have to do your job, then why do I have you on staff? So my team members are seasoned professionals, and I really do believe in, you have a group of professionals on your team who have different perspectives, and you need to listen to very different perspectives. And then at the end of the day, I have to make a call, but I need to root it in sometimes differing opinions. You need to listen and figure out where people are coming from, because if you don't have that kind of multiplicity of views, you can't get to the right decision. And it's not about my decision, it's about the right decision. Right. And so that's how, and we all make mistakes, but I really believe that when I'm making decisions, it's about what I think is going to be the best for the institution. I take that very much to heart, that, if it's rooted in good values and it's about our mission and vision, then, even if you make a mistake, it can't be that bad. It's rooted in the right thing, right?
Well, you have assembled a pretty extraordinary team. I've gotten to know a number of the senior leadership, and they're all very, very special people. I'm thinking of 5 or 6 just off the top of my head, and it's a testament to your leadership and your vision and your guidance that they're there, and that you're recruiting these amazing people, and that they're staying there, and that they're doing so well. I think you have brought, I mean, truly, Rachel, I think you have brought a breath of fresh air, of vision, of excitement to the institution. I going to the music center as a kid was kind of scary. It was such a serious place. You would wear a necktie, and I can remember hearing Rubinstein perform, and Horowitz, and Sirkin, and of course the Academy Awards were one time at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and it is just transformed into this wonderful community space. And I want to thank you for that, because it's really exciting what's happening. So I have to ask this question. We're coming up on 30 minutes. And this is my favorite question, because of course I grew up in this town. But you said earlier you love all the different communities in this town. And I know exactly what you mean. But what does Rachel Moore do for fun? What do you do to blow off steam and get out there among them and enjoy yourself in the world?
Well, pre-COVID, dinner parties, love dinner parties, and of course, I love to travel, and I love to see the arts from around the world and see things, and I live in Los Feliz with my husband and a group of cats, so we have a wonderful time. We have a beautiful view, and I love to read, but being with friends is the most important thing for me.
Boy, we sure learned that the last several months, haven't we? Well, in conclusion, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? We're going to be putting this out over the wires, and it's going to get a good amount of attention. Anything else you'd like to say?
Just that I think that over this past year, we've learned about what's really important in life. And I think that we now really appreciate how important the arts are to our collective health and healing. So I look forward to seeing as many people come to downtown, come to the theaters, come to the park, come to the plaza, because it will bring you joy and happiness.
So true. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for visiting with us today. I so appreciate it. As we launch these community conversations, I know that folks are going to hopefully enjoy them and find them interesting and informative and illuminating. And you're a pretty special part of our city. You're one of the treasures of Los Angeles now.
Oh my goodness.
And we're going to make you a native Angelino. I'm allowed to do that. I can confer that upon you. So, Rachel, thank you so much.
Oh,
and
course.
Every good wish for continued success is all wonderful.